Welcome to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast where innovation isn't just an ideal, it's a way of life. I'm your host and creator of the Innovate, Disrupt, or Die newsletter, Danny Nathan. Welcome back, folks. This episode, I get to introduce another close friend of mine and awesome partner, Jared Neutel from Neutech. Jared, welcome from your newest office.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. It's great to be here. I love talking to you as always. And yes, this is my first day sitting in my new home office. So if you hear any echoes, everybody, that is why. And apologies, I will improve on that.
We'll turn on echo cancellation. Nobody will notice. Awesome. So, Jared, let's just dive right in. First, tell us a bit about yourself. Just give us a quick intro since I didn't bother to ask you for one.
For sure. Well, the most important thing about me, I am the father of McKenna and husband of Naomi. It's the three of us. I live in California, and the biggest and most important part is my family. That is the best way to get to know me. But outside of that, what I do for work, which is probably what you're more interested in, I am the CEO of Neutech. We are a senior level staff augmentation agency that spans over most of LATAM. So that is what we do and how we do it. We focus in on recruiting our own talent, training them in-house, and then offering them to the American market.
Nice. So tell me a bit more about what problem you're solving through Neutech and how you're differentiated from other higher-end engineer type companies.
You know, I come from a product background, Danny, similar to you, where I have been tasked with hiring engineers my whole career previous to Neutech, right? And it just sucked. You know, you could go to Upwork and every engineer, a dime a dozen, right? Doesn't scale and can be very expensive. You can go to overseas agencies and sometimes you can get lucky with a couple greats, but usually you're dealing with time zone issues, language barriers, processes that you don't want to enforce within your own company. And it just turns into a headache, right? And then lastly, you can hire in-house, which is usually the best for control and making sure that things get done the way you want, but it can be expensive and laborious. And you know, there's just the natural cons that come with having overhead in general for a business. So at Neutech here, the problem we're trying to solve is bringing on talent at a senior level clip very easy for growing companies. The way that we do it is we offer very, very flexible month-to-month arrangements. All of our staff are trained in-house, so the quality of them is very high, not just in terms of programmatic ability, but for me, the most important part of it is actually all what we call the Neutech intangibles. Things like work ethic, right? Generally giving a shit about what you're working on.
Yes.
Not having an ego about your work, but being confident enough to voice your opinions. But if somebody else has a better one, then you roll with it as if it was your own. Being able to be a leader on a team, yet also take ownership of your work, but also delegate to others. There are just these small subtleties that make any employee or any person on your team inherently more valuable and more senior just by exuding those qualities, right? You know, communication, speaking fluent English, right? On the same time zone, right?
Yes.
Pretty important to be able to get work done effectively. So all of those things are very important. So that's how we differentiate ourselves. We are in a very highly commoditized space. We like to think of ourselves as the most expensive, highest quality, cheap option. And so from that standpoint, we know how to work with startups and companies of all sizes from, you know, somebody with an idea in a garage and some savings all the way through Fortune 500 customers. So
Nice.
It really ranges in terms of the needs. And frankly, the needs as a company grow and change as they get bigger through time, right? So, you know, a startup may have different needs in the beginning for us than say when they get to a place where they're going for IPO. And we can really change our approach and how we do work with them as they grow and as they shrink, et cetera. So that's really our sandbox. And what we do special is just the stuff that I call the basics. It shouldn't be special, but I think it is.
I would have to agree. And I sort of feel obligated at this point to mention in full disclosure that you and I met because my company started working with Neutech, your company, and our friendship grew through the interactions that we had through that relationship. And folks, completely unbidden testament or statement of confidence for Jared and his team here. We have continued to work with them for, God, like 4 years now, Jared, something like that.
I think so. Yeah. Time flies.
Because those intangibles and the special secret sauce that really shouldn't be special or secret are. So kudos to you on that one, Jared.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you're right. The best part of the job is not even getting the work done. It's the relationships that you get to build along the way. And I think of you as my friend before even my colleagues. So that, hopefully that's the relationship I develop with everybody as we work together.
Well, I'm sure you must have a lot of friends in your phone now. All right. So moving right along, talk to me a little bit, Jared, about what inspired you to start Neutech. Was there, I mean, obviously you've nodded at kind of the key insight or frustration of it's really hard to hire good technical talent. What got you from the moment of it's really hard to hire good technical talent to I'm going to go out and solve this problem by starting a company and staffing people from Latin America into the US market? Like, that's a pretty big
Yeah.
leap. How did you get there?
Totally. Well, it took many steps and many layers, as you might imagine. The first one, the basal level motivation was I hated working for somebody else. It just was not for me. You have a line that you usually tell people, which I love, a square peg in a round hole. You own that image of yourself. I kind of feel the same way. It's very hard for me to sit in a room, give opinions that are passed over, not taken into consideration. And while not all jobs are like that, the ones that I was in sometimes felt that way. I loved my old employers and I have great relationships, frankly, with all of them. There aren't that many. I started my journey quite early in my career, but those that I do have, I still keep up with and I still have a great relationship with. But I was early in my career and there was a reason they didn't empower me, but I still couldn't get there. And so that's what frankly inspired me to get started with Neutech. It was just a step in my journey and wanting to start something for myself and going into a field that I knew quite intimately. But it wasn't staff augmentation in Latte and training your own talent in the beginning.
Sure.
What it really was from day one, it was building WordPress websites. I'll never
Okay.
I will never forget the first ever website that Neutech sold. I still have the cash. It was a cash job for my friend JJ. Shout out JJ. And I built his band website using
Nice.
HTML. Literally. And I built it myself. Whether or not it's still on the internet, I am unsure. But that was my first ever website. And then from there, I layered it on. Okay, this could be done better in WordPress. Okay, I shouldn't be doing the coding myself. Okay, let me bring on somebody that can help me. Oh, wow, I found this person, on Fiverr or on Upwork. Wow, that sucked. How can I do this better? Then you start to learn the business, learn how to recruit. And then slowly but surely, I added a layer to layer to layer, found new minor problems. But in the grand scheme of things, I solved a major problem kind of by accident.
So, what was the major problem? How did you accidentally stumble into it?
I think that it started with communication. I found
Okay.
it extremely difficult as a founder to communicate with outside talent, and finding people who actually took in the feedback that I gave them at a reasonable hour was the hardest thing to solve. How do you work with
Uh,
talent overseas, take the economies of scale in different global economies for that sense, and how do you make that work with an American market at the level that I needed them to be at in order to grow my business and not spend all of my time managing them? And that became increasingly difficult. And that was the first problem I wanted to solve. On the other side of it, customer service. New tech, one big thing that we do, and again, you and I are friends before anything else now, but in the very beginning, I would imagine and would hope that one of the things that stood out about us was just having good customer service. You'd hit me up with a problem, solve it together really quickly. I'd never say no, and we just figure it out. That's not something that all companies do these days, and definitely not engineers or designers
no,
directly.
no, it's
So,
definitely not.
so that was
So,
another,
Jared, for some context here,
yeah,
how long have you been building new tech? You're talking about it as
ooh,
early career, you're talking about your learnings over time.
yeah.
Help us kind of paint a picture of what has that time frame looked like? How long has it taken to get from the Buddies band website hand coded to, oh no, we have a huge Rolodex or
Yeah.
staff of engineers that we now roll into Fortune 500s who look like a band of badasses?
For sure. Thank you. It's funny. Like when I really start thinking about it, it's almost like what I tell Naomi, my wife. Why count the years when you're going to be married forever, right? Um, line doesn't
Most
work.
people know what anniversary they're on, though.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've been doing this since, gosh, 2014. So quite some time. What's it? We're in 20. So what's it? 13 years. Is that
I think
right?
that might be 11, Jared, but yeah, we'll call it 13.
11. Like I said, I'm bad. Yeah. So we've been, so I guess roughly 12 years since I was in college building those websites, self-taught engineer myself, then transitioned out into product, then started working at a product at a dev shop as an engineer. Then I transitioned into a product role, left there, worked at a growing startup, was at the time a seed stage startup. By the time I left, it was Series C. And I was in charge of product. And then I started actually I did a biotech company while doing new tech, but new tech was always the thing I was doing on the side until it became the main thing.
All right. Well, let's dive into the nitty gritty kind of fun stuff here. How do you define innovation in the context of what you're building at
It's a
Neutech?
great question. I would say that within new tech, our innovations come from processes. So what tools to use? How do we use them efficiently within our teams? How do we package up our services in a way that's new and inventive that actually serves our customers well? So innovation to me is really, if you think of your company as a coil of wire, how do you keep turning that coil tighter and tighter and tighter, right?
Okay.
And make things more efficient. That's really where things started because now in the beginning, it was, how do you innovate? It started with those things that we spoke about, customer service, and it's, just the offering, right? The
Hmm.
process, the operations. Then we started innovating by training our own talent in-house, right? Where we struck deals predominantly with the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. We and one of my partners, Raf, our global CTO, he's on the board of the nonprofit that governs the engineering department of the University of Sao Paulo, right?
Oh, well, that's a
So
nice little in to have there.
yeah, not too bad, right? Having that relationship, right, is an innovation because now we can recruit students, pull them in, and train them within our infrastructure. So we know what habits they have and don't have. We know what, talents and communication skills and lack thereof they have even from when they were in university. So we're innovating the recruitment process, right? Like that's how that was an innovation we had. Then we have the talent, right? Now it's how do we package that? So I believe we innovated the process of which having people in house then turns into client work. But then you might think to yourself, well, how do you have a bench big enough to be able to support all of those people at all times, right? So we started what's called our residency program, the New Tech Academy, the residency program, which is where we have enterprise deals where we can take talent that's still in training, plug them in at a cheaper rate, give them the right of first refusal to hire people in house directly, but if they don't, those newly minted seniors that we go through training with those bigger clients then come into our workforce and then get recycled back as senior level people training the new incoming student. We've created an operational pipeline of supply to bridge the gap between junior and senior level engineer without having to incur costs internally.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really, I think, the most interesting part of what you've just described, Jared. And I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So, you've built a relationship with the University of Sao Paulo. You get effectively first dibs at the computer science, I assume, students that are coming out of the university.
Design.
And, okay, got it. So, the students that are in a fitting technical role as opposed to just software engineers, for example. Okay. And then you are actively training them, but you are training them on the job by having them work with enterprise level customers who I assume are paying you for their time.
Yes, at a at about a break even, but yes, a little bit above
Okay,
break
fine.
even.
So you're not losing money on them, but they're getting hands on the job training. And then you guys get the benefit of the client gets the benefit of first right of refusal for the folks that they like. And then anybody that they don't scoop up, effectively, you get kind of second draft pick on.
Pretty much, kind of. But usually the way it works is with those enterprise clients, they like having the volume and they don't need senior level people for the tasks that they're working on, especially when you have senior level people overseeing the more
Okay.
junior level people. So it tends that we give them the right of first refusal if that's something that they would like to hire them, but it very infrequently happens. And what ends up happening is we will then take all of those senior leads, we'll offer them into the American market under new tech staff augmentation. And then anyone that isn't placed onto a project, we then become the new team leads for the incoming juniors and mids to train them on those, the incoming enterprise client relationships for those new people, because they kind of like the price points that they're at and
Right.
that they give us, and for the offering that we're able to give as a result, using them as a mechanism for training, which we know is the relationship with them, and they sign longer term deals, which
Hmm.
that training period for us. Yeah, that's how we are able to create our own talent, take them from junior to senior level and they have all of the intangibles because
At no
going,
cost, though. Like, let's be clear, you train them from just out of school to senior qualified engineers at basically no cost to yourself through active hands-on work with real-world clients.
that's right.
And
That's
then you
right.
get to take advantage of them coming out of that.
That's exactly
I
right.
would definitely consider that innovation. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and to take it even one step farther, we work with the professors at the University of Sao Paulo. So they will actually, while the students are in school over their 4 to 5 year program, we actually are looking at and earmarking which students would be good for our residency program. So we can very quickly understand who we want to go after. By the time they graduate, we have offers for them ready to go above market value. Then we take them to the residency program where it's 20 hours of instruction and 40 hours of work. It's a 60-hour work week. So we make sure
All
that they
right.
actually, and anyone that's weeded out in that program, you know, is gone. But those that we retain are usually with us for a very long time. And our retention in the company, and you'll appreciate this, being in the agency space, we have a 92% year-over-year retention of our talent. So it's
Wow, that's
extraordinarily,
fantastic.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's a really interesting sort of production line that you guys created. So then my next question here, Jared, given what you've described, um, are the ideals of innovation and disruption something that you actively think about on a regular basis? Are you applying these things deliberately, or are they emerging more organically in your decision-making process as you're building the business over time?
Look, I think there's elements of both. Some of these, like for example, the residency program, that was a development that happened over time. However, there are small things that we're innovating with even today, such as, the emergence of AI. We have to adapt to that, right? And how do we use the emergence of AI and build it into how we do things to set ourselves ahead of the curve or at least on par with it? So for example, we actually have a phased approach to how we have implemented AI into our day-to-day work. I can even go through like the kind of the different stages of that we've.
You and I could totally nerd out on that. I think that for the sake of our listeners, perhaps we'll keep moving. And I'm graciously assuming that we have listeners because, you know, we're early, but hey, awesome. So, as you were building out the Neutech business, what were the early indicators that you had stumbled into product market fit, or stumbled into does you a disservice? I apologize. But what were the early indicators that you were discovering product market fit along the way? And how did you go about sort of mining for those? Are you actively talking to your customers to understand what you are and aren't doing that is fitting for them? Like, talk to me about how did Neutech grow up?
It's a great question. It's a lot of trial and error. I wish I had the silver bullet. So maybe the way you phrased that to begin with was correct. I stumbled upon it a little bit. Uh,
Fair.
it's one of those things where you have to keep an open mind to changing how you do things, because if you
Oh,
don't,
yes.
then you're not going to end up growing or maturing as a business. So it started, like I said, as WordPress websites. Then I started to find there's a demand for different stuff. So, okay, I used similar talent in similar areas of talent to start doing that other stuff. But that was a mistake. I needed to use different types of people, different kinds of engineers, different kind of education, different kind of communication, all these different things that had to change as things went on. Then it was, how do you offer things differently? Like I personally don't like doing set rate work. In fact, I very infrequently offer it. I do hourly based work, right? You pay us for what we do. Why? Because, our early demographic, and it's still a demographic in ICP, but it's not, I would say, our main ICP as much anymore. But again, it's still a customer profile of ours. Early stage companies, the
Hmm.
zero call it. Doing fixed rate is you almost always going to be something that they want to do in the very beginning because they have limited funding.
Yeah.
Or what happens is, you start to talk about scope and scope creep and what is included versus what's not included. And what happens if they change their mind based off of an investor conversation that they had, and now they need to add this feature because of a new customer that they just received. And then how do you account for that when trying to work with them? So again, that was an evolution for us of, we need to be flexible enough with our billing to be able to account for them changing their mind, not just us not
Sure.
delivering, right?
And so that flexibility for you guys, if I'm understanding correctly, comes to life then through the sort of fixed monthly fee per head kind of thing. So ultimately what you ended up saying was, if you're an early stage company and you want to hire a new tech engineer, they are yours for the period that you've paid for them. You can do whatever you want with them. And if you need to redirect them onto some new feature, go for it. They're yours effectively. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, totally. But, yes. And we also have to know that customer profile, right? We have to come up with a package of sorts that gives them the guidance that, an agency would not. So it's not just people, right? Some people, customers know how to manage talent. Others think they know how to manage talent, but don't. And others just don't and admit that they don't, right? Some people always fall into one of those buckets. You, for example, fell into the bucket of you needed people, but you knew how to manage them and had an infrastructure to. Not everyone's like that. So, we had to come up with a way of how do we package this hourly rates, retainer based staff augmentation model into something that somebody who doesn't have any technical experience or any team building experience with, at least within the technical space, within the tech space, how do we package it in a way that makes them successful and de-risks their project? So we've come up with ways of billing in the way of retainer based model, but still gives them the support and structure as if it weren't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So, Jared, you mentioned earlier that you are in what you consider a highly commoditized space. And generally, if we look at what happens in a commoditized market, prices go down, differentiation amongst the offerings becomes minimal. How are you guys combating that, and how do you stand out in an otherwise commoditized market? Or is it solely based on amazing customer service, people that speak really good English and work on the same time zones? Like, are those your key differentiators, or are there other things that you bring into the mix to help further combat the sort of commoditization?
Totally. Well, it's a great question and a bit of both. Again, it's a dual pronged answer. Number one, yeah, I think that customer service and the way that we do our work and the quality of the engineers that we bring in for I think a very aggressively low price point, considering the value that, one gets back for our people. I think that contributes, of course, right? You have to be aggressive with your pricing. And if you're going to be more expensive than going, to overseas on your own or trying to use Upwork or something like that, I think that our pricing is actually pretty on par with if you were to try and do that anyways. But nonetheless, even if are marking up a bit, because we have a business, we have to make some money, of course, especially with all this operation pipeline that we have, you have to show the value for it, right? So that value comes through for us in quality of people, not having to worry about replacements and knowledge transfer, having flexible contracts, helping people hire in-house to replace this if that's what they need without it being a confrontational weird thing. All of that stuff, right, matters. But I would say one step farther and going back into the why us, how do we differentiate ourselves beyond just the basics of what you and I would consider a basic business attribute versus a new tech specific attribute that new tech just happens. I would say that we are very, very, very deep and experts in the social media build out / the financial services spaces.
Got it.
So we have, particularly within the financial services space, it's a kind of a beast of its own, right? Where you're building products with a completely different dictionary of lingo, dealing with people that work in a very different way, people that work at financial institutions, hedge funds, private equity, VC, they typically just function and have different kinds of personalities than most early stage startups. And they use
Yes.
lingos and they use terminologies and they kind of just assume sometimes that you know it. And that hard for just a regular engineer to come in and try and learn and keep up with all of that stuff. And also we are very exposed to pretty much, I mean, I can't say everything, but a lot of what's out there in terms of APIs, integrations. We know that stuff backwards and forwards. Oftentimes, we don't even need to look at documentation because we've done it 100 times, right? So our people are very accustomed to the small, deep intricacies of those spaces. Like, for example, oh, I need to build a feed handler into the New York Stock Exchange, right? Not all engineers would just know how to do that, even if you're senior level, the fact that we have experience doing that kind of stuff gives us an edge up because we are the go-to for data in financial services, because that's just what we do. And we do it well with all of those intangibles, and customer service makes it a very unique and lucrative offer for the customers in that industry and demographic.
Got it. So you're differentiating based on domain expertise in addition to level of service and capability.
And price.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair. Interesting. Sorry, I'm looking at my list of questions here going, geez, what do I want to ask you next? Talk to me a bit about growth. I know that you guys have grown substantially even in the time that I've known you. And I'm sure that the early days have some battle stories to go along with them in terms of, how did you get to the point where you could secure a Fortune 500 contract, for example? And what advice do you have for folks that are going through that kind of scaling mechanism or exercise right now?
Yeah. First, it's building reputation and network. That's the biggest thing that's helped our growth.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about that.
Mhm. Putting yourself out there, talking to a lot of people, adding value and building, in my opinion, genuine relationships. People love to help other people, but they only like to help other people when they legitimately have a connection with them and you're actually trying to support them too. It's not just a take, it's a give and a take. I've been very blessed and lucky to have been slowly building a network of people who I've just built good relationships with. Like when I travel and I am going to a city and I just text people, hey, I'm going to be here, and they're like, oh yeah, let's hang out. It's not let's talk work or let's talk shop. It's let's hang out. Yeah. Does an opportunity or something happen to be topic of conversation sometimes? Sure. But it's not about that. For me, it's about building those relationships and working really hard for people that we work with to inspire that growth. Right. So that helps. Then there's also, you know, infrastructure. If you're going to try and go after a big company, you got to make sure you can do it and do it well. I mean, we've had opportunities even with those size of companies. We recently had a bid out to a Fortune 500 company, on the name of which I won't mention.
Yeah, please.
But it was a very large contract that we were going to receive with somebody with whom I've built a really awesome relationship with, not a working relationship yet. Hopefully in the future that will happen. But, she brought us this opportunity and we couldn't do it. It's not that we didn't have the people, but from a timeline and scope perspective, it wasn't clear enough for me to be certain that I would deliver. And I turned it down, not because I wanted to turn
Interesting.
it I had to be prepared. And in order to take on opportunity like that, one, you have to build the network and the relationships to bring those opportunities to your plate. But when they come, you got to make sure you can deliver. Because if you can deliver, then you become maybe not a hero, but you become a trusted resource
Sure.
that they'll start sharing with other people. If you don't deliver, that could kill not only that relationship, but it could also hurt your reputation in your network, right? Now there's always that person that will not be able to give you a referral, or that the people that that are in that network with you, it just makes it harder. So, I'm very careful about, it's not just about getting the opportunities, but it's also when to take them. Sometimes it's very difficult to turn down what is seemingly, a great
Yeah, I was
opportunity.
just going to jump into that a little bit. I mean, turning down a big offer from a Fortune 500 company has got to be a pretty tough decision to make. How
Mhm.
did you sort of wrestle with the moment of, the opportunity versus the reality of not being certain that you could deliver to the level that you expect of yourself? And I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but I think that's what I'm hearing is that, there's a lot of other companies out there that even in your shoes probably would have said yes and figured it out later.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
I've certainly been in a seat where I've, taken that stance and said, all right, well, let's just go for it and see what happens.
Mhm.
How do you kind of weigh that out? And how do you maintain that relationship that you've worked so hard to build after you've said no to a person? Because often that might sort of shut things down.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. To answer the latter part of that, you just have an open, honest relate. Hopefully, by the time you're getting to the point, and to get a deal of that size with a company of that size, usually you have a relationship with somebody that you've been nurturing and growing for quite some time. It doesn't just come out of the blue, unless it's more of an RFP. But even then, when you go through RFPs, usually you have somebody on the other side that you've known or are working with to help get things through. It just came down to the conversation with her. And I said, listen, you know, do I think I can do this? Yes. Am I 100% certain I can do this without any change to scope or, resourcing?
Mhm.
No. And that's just the truth. And I admitted that to her. And I said, hey, if you know that these constraints can happen and we might have to problem solve together to get this thing done by this deadline, then let's work on it. Let's do it. We'll figure it out together. But if the expectation is you must deliver by this date and this is the resources you must have and the scope is not fully defined, I can't commit to that. So
Yeah, well, and the scope not being fully defined is a huge kind of kicker in there too, because you just sort of know to expect change at that point.
yeah, and with this particular deal, there was also a reliance on their internal team and
Okay.
teams, which, if I'm going to take on an aggressive deadline, I want to be fully in control of what we receive and when and how we do it versus having to collaborate with another team that we've never collaborated with before and try and figure those things out on the fly with, again, an aggressive deadline. This wasn't going to be the time I wanted to take that chance. And it was just an open and honest conversation with my connection at this company. And she said, Jared, you know what? If anything, I actually respect you more for you turning me down, because she's obviously an incredible person herself, and didn't want to see me fail and didn't want to put me in a position to fail. And she didn't want me to put her in a position to fail. So rather figure that out in the beginning than when you're a couple months down the road. But yes, a lot of money at stake. And I didn't want to play around with that level of cash if I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to deliver. And but going back to, you know, how do I turn that down, right? And how do I even evaluate that? The stage one was the opportunity hit my plate. I just let myself be excited. I was like driving a car and like blasting the music on the way to the gym, lifting, like I was pumped, right? Like this opportunity that I've been trying to nurture for quite some time is finally seemingly here. And I enjoyed that, right? Because that was a successful sales mission in a way. Like I got the opportunity that I've been so desperately trying to receive from this lead. I mean, it took a long time to get there. And I think it's good to enjoy it because if it panned out and the deal went through, then that would have been even better. But I want to reward myself for putting myself in the correct position, right? I didn't do anything wrong during that sales cycle. I got to the end goal I wanted to get to, which was get the opportunity, and it was mine to turn down. But then you start digging deeper. After I had that realization, I needed to get my team involved. Okay, what are we solving here? How many people will this take to solve? What are our variables? What are the risks, right? Let's really identify those risks. How would those risks, if they came to fruition, affect the project timeline? How would that affect resourcing? Is that something that we can fix with more people, or is it just something that we have to wait on, and time is time and it's not fixable by just adding more resources or heads to the problem? And as we started peeling back those layers, we started to see that while this would be an awesome revenue opportunity for us and profitable opportunity for us, it just seemed like more of a moonshot to get done than something that was actually realistic, even if we had the right people. And even then, we weren't 100% sure because the problem we were trying to solve, it was integrating with a platform on one side of we were doing an API build out, right? Actually, it was 6 APIs, but it was 6 API build outs in 2 months. So it's like, okay, we have to integrate them into the end consumer for them as a part of it, but the end consumer was undefined at the point. We were ingesting data, right, from their team, but the data models were not done. So
Okay. So
it's
the
again,
client introduced a lot of risk out of the gate and then expected you to sort of work around it.
yeah, and they to their point, they came up with really great solutions as to how to mitigate that risk as best as possible, the same ways that I would. But it's hard for me to commit to a deadline when something could come back to us. The data model could come back, even if, you could say that we could just put in, seed a data model with some stuff and just use that as your dummy data as you build out these APIs and, use that and to go through the whole process, right? But what happens if for whatever reason, the data model changes as it's being built for some reason that they didn't anticipate? Because that's the nature of software. Like, I don't blame them for
Hmm.
that. Things happen, right? But then we've done all of this work, assuming that the data structure was the way it was. And then maybe in the 11th hour, something changes that now falls on us to fix, right? And maybe there just isn't enough time to do that throughout the whole process of that API gateway. So it was just when it came down to it, it's not their fault. Like they've done nothing wrong. It's
Oh,
just,
and we're not placing blame or anything here.
but if I'm going to deliver and promise a delivery for a certain timeline, I wasn't going to put myself in a position where there was a chance that it was going to fail, whether it's because the data was ready or not, or because we messed up the API. I was going to take this on and, rather keep up with this lead and do things the right way. And hopefully that, they succeed. And that would be awesome if they do, because I genuinely want them to be successful. But we still have a friendship on the other side of it too, where this lead has turned into a friend who I know that if she had another opportunity come up that she could use my help for, now she knows I'm not going to accept something unless I know I can deliver. building that trust, even by virtue of turning something down, I think was an important step.
Gotcha. Interesting. So I have another question for you, Jared, that has sort of come to mind as you're explaining this. And what dawns on me is that not unlike, Apollo 21 as a business, you are very much in the service industry in that you're helping clients achieve their goals. And so we talked a lot about what innovation looks like within the walls of Neutech, but what we haven't talked much about is how you view your relationship with your clients in terms of helping them with their innovation goals.
Mhm.
Do you guys do that? Do you think about that? Like, what role do your clients' goals play, and how do you sort of align your efforts to theirs so that you know that there's that kind of mutual respect for what you're working?
Yeah, certainly. Look, we rely on our clients to be the visionaries. My goal is not to take their creative license away from them, but I can help them flesh it out, and I can help them get more excited by different ideas, by things I've seen in the market and different experiences that we've had. So as we help them with innovation, I call upon my past experiences of, okay, there is a similar play, with this kind of, maybe they're building a CRM, right? Oh, we've built CRM that's very similar. And these are some of the things that we felt, issues that our other client fell into in the past. Maybe we can take some of those principles and carry them forward. And then we can, offer them, obviously making sure that we don't cross any NDA boundaries or IP boundaries, but, taking, some element of how do we coach our founders to fleshing out a realistic MVP, to really thinking more deeply about, their innovations. We're not there to do it for them. We're there to support them and to make it technically possible. And how to layer that approach. So, oh, I want to build, one of our clients, I want to build TikTok and rebuild it. Okay, awesome. Really hard thing to do. Let's layer that back. Like, what's step one? What's step two? What's step three? How can you do things differently?
Gotcha.
How are you thinking about this thing? What is your differentiator? How can we hit that really hard? Right. And then we will work with them and help them innovate. And sometimes if they task us with coming up with new ideas, new features, new whatever, we'll present them. And sometimes those presentations lead to further thoughts because they are at the end of the day, the innovators. And we're there again to be the boots on the ground people to implement their innovation. And yeah, through experience, we've learned a couple of things and more than just a couple. And we've been able to kind of coach them and guide their brains into innovate. If they are great innovators, how do we make them super great? Or like extra great, right? How do we take their fire and, not just let it be a little ember, but turn it into a full-fledged, campfire, right? How do we help light something under them to inspire them to come up with the ideas? Again, that I think is the secret sauce of how we inspire our founders through innovation is by optimizing their creativity.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So you're innovation enablers.
Yeah, that's right. And making sure that we know when to, say, hey, we can build this thing, but realistically, this is how it's going to be phased on. Or, hey, here's this idea. We've seen this kind of thing fail before. This is why we believe it to fail. What do you think of approaching it like this? Yeah, that's great. Like, why don't we do this, and then this, and this, right? It just helps give another perspective to the awesome idea using experience that helps, zig and zag them in a direction that we truly believe in our heart of hearts that is going to make them more successful.
Awesome. All right. Circling around to kind of a different line of questioning here, let's talk about leadership and culture for a second and how innovation plays a role in that. How do you go about fostering innovation as somebody who is leading, as you said, a pretty sizable team at this point, and ensuring that people feel like they have the opportunity to explore, especially given what you've described about your business and your model and your role, in that often what you're doing is building somebody else's vision and helping them achieve it as opposed to building your own. So where
Yeah.
does that kind of come to life organizationally?
That's a great question. We can start with the hardest one, in my mind, the easiest one, but outside looking in might be the hardest one to foster is how do you get hired guns to take ownership of a project that isn't theirs or that they don't
Mm.
have equity, right? The actual engineers. That's what most people ask me is how do you inspire people to work that hard for them when it's not theirs, right? Or they don't have equity in the business. The way you do it, frankly, is you make typically people are looking for a challenge. And so instead of saying, hey, we're building up this business for somebody else's dream, it's we are solving a really awesome problem and we get to be the creators, maybe let the client be the innovator and the create, have the creativity on the product side. We get to have it on the technical side. And how do we solve like really interesting, cool problems to scale and then seeing your work out there in the market one day to kind of, make a mark on the world yourself. And not only do we get to do that for one company, we get to do that for so many, right? And so it's just finding different ways to inspire people. And usually the people, going back to culture and who we hire and the new tech intangibles, the people that we bring in are more interested in solving problems than the financial output of that. And so we love those kinds of people, the problem solvers, right? The ones that just will keep at a problem and think of new creative ways to solve them because that's just how they're wired, right? From the end engineer standpoint, that's how we think of it. Then getting through leadership throughout the organization. Building a company culture is really hard. It's really hard, especially in a remote world. So for us, I mean, we purchased and renovated a big office in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We spent quite a bit of money on that to have a place, and it's not even the office is not even set up to have a bunch of cubicles where people are, just working. Yes, do we have a section with a bunch of computers for people to plug their laptops in and have monitors? Sure, obviously we do. Do we have offices in there? Yes, but we've built it more as a collaboration space so that you could come in and have, a meeting with your team and you guys can all plan to come into the office and actually have lunch together, work through problems, whiteboard things, go into the meeting rooms there. We have a chef that comes into the office every day. We have a big industry, or what's it call it, a restaurant like industry style kitchen.
Okay.
So like it's a professional kitchen.
Like a commercial kitchen.
Thank you. That's the word. A commercial kitchen. Yeah. English is hard. We have a commercial kitchen that engineers can, cook in or have the chef make some things for them. And fostering that level of culture is the most important thing. And then it comes down to respect, setting up processes in place. So it's not somebody's fault. It's more of we're following the process or we're not.
Got it. Respect. Hang on. Hang on. I want to circle back to the office for a second because you're on an interesting track there. Not that respect isn't important, of course. So are people required to come into the office or is it a totally optional, but there if you need it kind of collaboration space?
We make it required to come in, I think it's once a week, or something like that. But like not, but the day that it's not strongly enforced and it's not like, it's not, it's just more
Basically try to show up one day a week kind of thing.
it's like, hey, like we want to make sure that you are here and that you know what's going on and you have time to meet with people. What we find is that people come in organically because they find it easier to all, instead of being on a Google Meet all day, because we have that too, where you just have a Google Meet open and you're all in there doing your own thing, and then you bring something up when it comes up. They can just be in the same room together. So for team bonding, particularly more when you get to the size that we're at, it's not having all 200 people come into the office in one day, although we do that once a year. We want to try it once a quarter, but it's less about that. It's more about, okay, we have 5 people on this project with this client. Like they can come into the office and take one of the meeting rooms and hang out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm pressing on it because, there's been obviously a ton of chatter around remote work and does it work and, what does the future of work look like? And, particularly coming out of, I can't believe that we're still talking about the pandemic 5 years later, but, coming out of the pandemic, it feels like the ideals around offices and co-working spaces have changed. And the reason that I was sort of interested to spend a moment talking about that is like, I'm personally of the belief, one, I strongly believe in remote work, but I also think that if you're going to have an office, the idea of it being, as you said, cubicles and offices and, this is my space, period, leave me alone, versus having it be the collaborative kind of clubhouse meets office is an interesting dichotomy or question to consider. And my take on it is that the clubhouse sort of meet when you want to, but have a place to do so comfortably where it feels like home is perhaps the way forward. And so I find it interesting that you not only are in support of that, but you literally just took the time and the financial expenditure to build that, literally.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, remote work, COVID, the pandemic is the reason that my business can grow because companies are now open to hiring contractors that don't go into their office every day. And so by virtue of that, I'm in large support of remote work. Of course. I mean, that's how we operate, at least us to our end clients. That being said, there's something to having an in-person interaction. There's a reason that, I travel and meet up with people. I feel like our relationship probably took another level. Yes, we were both in LA at the time, but when we meet up in person, that's where we got most of our like strategy done and the relationship got built, right? There is something to having in-person time with somebody. Does it need to be every day in an office? No, but we wanted to create a space that allowed for that because there's something not just for client to customer or client to vendor, but also from colleague to colleague that is hard to pick up on over a Zoom, you know. Uh,
Absolutely.
and
Speaking of
so
which, are you still coming to New York next week?
I am. So we should we
Awesome.
should
All
we
right,
should decide.
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I was
Cool.
playing up today.
Nice. All right. Last few questions that I want to run through. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice that would land like year one, what would you tell yourself then that you know now?
I would I would tell myself not to get too worked up over small situations. I'm a very anxiety driven person inherently. I think I've spoken about this before publicly in my blog and I think on podcasts or stuff. I'm a fear driven entrepreneur, or at least I was, and or transitioning out of it, right? But a fear based entrepreneur, one that is more afraid of losing something or a problem than I am excited about a new opportunity, right? So I live this life of
Interesting.
anxiety of making sure that we keep things are good. And it's a very effective use of energy. Like it is really, really good for customer service. And it's really, really good for solving problems, but it's really, really bad. So
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds pretty difficult to live with. I mean, you're sitting here telling me how great it is, but I don't know.
I think of it like this is you're running a car on like tar as energy, like burning coal to power a car versus using gasoline versus using electricity, right? Some is cleaner than others. And while the coal engine, like on a train, is very effective for moving a giant locomotive and going really fast. No, it's not the cleanest, right? Source of energy. So,
You're not shoveling coal into the burner in the back of your EV.
well, no, I'm not, but I am. And so, this fear-driven approach is very effective, and motivating, but it's very difficult to manage on a personal mental level, and eventually I'll burn out. I've burnt out before, and the silver lining is okay. Like, don't I've been in business for 11 years.
13, Jared, 13.
13, lucky number 13. No, I've been in business for 11 years, I guess, and because math is really hard. I've hit really great times. I've had really shitty times. We've had customers come, we've had customers go. We've had things be our faults. We've had things not be our faults. And I know that I can solve all these problems. And sometimes the ones that I can't solve, stressing about it is not going to make it any better. It's just, okay, like, let's do the best that we can do, put the right things in place, put our best foot forward, learn from it. Learning is key and move on. Roger Federer actually gave I watched this video recently. He gave a
It was a commencement speech, right?
commencement speech, yeah, to Dartmouth, I think. And he asked the audience, like, how many of my matches do you think I won? And it was 80%. 80% of his career matches he won. Of those matches, yeah. Of those matches, how many points did he win individually? It was 54%. So what's really interesting
Interesting.
is what he said is focus on each point, right? As much as you can, nail it, learn from it. For every awesome serve, cool, this is how I do awesome serves. Every return that was crazy that he used to do, awesome. You lose a point, don't start thinking about it all the time. You got to put it behind you and focus on the next point as if the old point didn't happen. Learn from, right? And he only won 54% of all of his points, but it amounted to 80% of his matches. So it teaches you, right? It's the concept of put the small battles behind you, learn from them, but put them behind you and focus on the next battle ahead. And if you keep doing that and doing it well, you'll win 80% of your matches. So, and become a legend, right? So that's how I'm trying to train myself in thinking. There are things that are more important than work, like my family. That's why I opened this with I'm a father and a husband. That's to me is the most important thing. Work is what I do. My family is what I live for. So it's, and yes, work allows me to provide and all those things, which is important. But, for me, it's, yeah, there's an unhappy customer, something happened. Okay, that's going to be a difficult point. If I can win the point, that's great. Don't celebrate for you got to focus on the next one. If it fails, okay, don't be, hard on myself. When I didn't take on that Fortune 500 customer, that was a missed point. It sucked, The point of getting the sales through the process and celebrating that was a 1 point. I won that point. I was excited about it, but I didn't stay happy for so long that I would have made a bad decision in taking it in with, right? And that
Right.
was a deal. But now I move on to the next battle. I don't let it hurt me, right? And so that's how this fear-driven entrepreneur approach has slowly been shifting for me into a more mature, entrepreneur and a better business.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're progressing beyond the fear. That sounds like a tough place to live.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
as we're talking about, focusing on the next point, what do you think is next for Neutech? What are you focused on? What's the next innovation? What's the next big thing for you?
Well, on a minor level, we spoke about the innovation and use of AI. So we
Mhm.
are and coming up with new ways of using AI in our current workflows. Um, you know, Obviously vibe coding is a huge topic right now. I just got off of a podcast earlier this week. Shout out Matt Berman talking about vibe coding, and that was our main topic. People like me typically are against it. I'm actually not fully for it, but not fully against it either. I think there's utility for it when done correctly, which is very different to how people are using it today.
Yes.
Right. It's the new shiny toy, but doesn't mean it's not a fun toy if you use it right. It's just not as awesome as people think it is. But those are the little innovations, the next steps, right? Of how do we use that to our advantage? How do we use different things to our advantage? Those are like the next smaller things that we're innovating. Then beyond that, it's myself. Like, how do I get myself out of certain situations and give me a support team that allows me to be more effective at what I'm gifted at? I'm really good at building relationships, real relationships. And I don't want to be stuck in the mundane day to day of every project. Not because that stuff isn't important, but because I can find people that can do that just as well, if not better than me. And I can focus on growing my network and growing my business. And so finding the right people, and it's not just a matter of bringing people in. It's a matter of bringing in the right people to take off the right things from me. So that's something that I've been working on. And then as a business, I can't talk too deeply about it, although you know exactly what I'm alluding to from our own conversations. It's how do you come up with, new distribution channels? How do you come up with new sales approaches? How do you come up with new stuff? Because if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So I constantly have to think for myself, like to myself, like what is the next thing I'm going to do? And will it work? Maybe not. If it does, great. Now I've pushed myself a little bit more forward. So those are the things that I think about on a day to day.
Awesome. All right. Jared, thank you for joining us. Is there anything that we missed that you're absolutely dying to share? Anything I forgot to ask?
No, we've gone through a lot of really awesome stuff. I
We've
would
covered
say
a lot of ground. Yeah.
we really have. I would say that the only thing I'd like to say is just for if you're a founder out there that really just needs the confidence to go to the next step. Danny and I are both the kind of people you can approach just to talk things out. You don't have to commit to paying anything. Like just flesh out your ideas because you never know what idea can be the next big thing. And we've done it and built them before. Talk to Danny about it. I'm sure he may or may not loop me in, but I'm sure he will. Like we can work on things together that doesn't have to feel like such a gigantic step. Let's take a big problem and make it really small and go from there.
Amen. Awesome. All right, Jared, where can folks that might happen to listen to this find you, learn more about Neutech, and get in touch?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is just to email me directly for listeners of the pod. My email is Jared, Jared, at Neutech, Neutech.co. That comes to me directly. That's my personal email. And if you want to check out our website, it's neutech.co.
Awesome. All right, folks, you heard him. Spam Jared, please. Jared, it's been a pleasure as always. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. And thank you so much for taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Innovate, Disrupt, or Die. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. Join us again for our next episode And don't forget to subscribe at innovatedisruptordie.com. That's all, folks.